Sup peoples, and welcome back to another video. Today we're doing something a little bit differently. A subscriber asked how I'm able to analyze TV shows like I do for my What Writers Can Learn From series here on my channel. I never really tried to break down how I analyze it, so that's what we're doing in this video. This is going to be the process of how I learned to learn from TV shows and other media like books. Now, for the purposes of this video, I wanted to break down The Dragon Prince. There's a new season coming out really soon, and I want to do two videos, one about the villains and one about the heroes. And so I figured that that was a great opportunity to talk about how I analyze things. Now, the first thing is to pick what about the show you want to analyze. What made it stand out to you? For The Dragon Prince, and for most things, it's the characters. I'm a character-driven reader and watcher of shows. So I wanted to talk about the villains and the heroes in this show. Once you understand what you want to analyze, understanding why you want to analyze it will help you figure out what things you need to focus on the most in your analysis. With The Dragon Prince, the reason that I wanted to talk about the characters, and especially the villains, is because I love how messy the relationships between them are. So I wanted to focus in on that specifically. That tells me I liked the villains, but why did I like them? I liked them because of messy relationships. Well, how can I write messy relationships like that in my own story? It's all about digging into the layers of why you like something in the first place. And now that I've identified what I really liked about The Dragon Prince, I can begin breaking that down into basically character analysis blog posts that I read to you. That's pretty much what it is. A lot of times, I know that I like something about a show, but I actually learn from the process of making the video. Sitting down and writing down my analysis to read it to you in a video is how I make the analysis. It's not like these thoughts, I mean, they're swimming around in my head to a certain degree, and I learn things in a way, but a lot of times while I'm making the analysis, I'll have these sort of aha moments where I'm like, that's why that worked. Because I'm not naturally inclined to just, well, okay, I am naturally inclined to deep dive and obsess about a character for an incredibly long amount of time, but I'm not inclined to write it down. And writing it down means that you have to have all your thoughts in one place cohesively. And that's a really good way, in my opinion, and for my process, to have an analysis that's more than just ideas swimming around in the cosmic soup of my brain. It means that it has to stop being concepts and it starts to being like a thesis, almost scientifically. I have to have proof to back up my theories. And I have to be able to outline it in a way that explains what you could learn from it. And then that means that I can also learn from it. So if you're going to be analyzing a show like this, or a book or whatever, I would really suggest writing things down. It super helps to make your thoughts clear and concise. Now that we've figured out what to analyze, we can figure out how to analyze it. There's a couple of different things that I want to talk about from this show. I really, really love it. It's probably one of my favorite shows I've watched over the last couple of years. But because the show isn't fully finished coming out, I feel like there are some character arcs that I can't talk about yet because they haven't been completed, like Claudia's. Claudia's character arc I don't feel like has been finished. I feel like it's just begun. And for that reason, I'm going to be doing two sets of videos over the next couple years. This is a set of videos about the characters from seasons 1 through 3. And then the next set of videos will be about the characters after the time jump and those character arcs. So for this, we're just going to be talking about and breaking down and analyzing seasons 1 through 3 of The Dragon Prince. There's a lot to break down in just that, so I think we'll have plenty to talk about. But that does mean that there are some character arcs that I won't be addressing until later videos once those character arcs and evolutions have wrapped up. But I think that there are a couple characters that we can definitely talk about right now. For the villains video, I want to talk about Viren, Soren, and Erebos. Because I'm always talking on this channel about character backstories and character motivations and all of that, but people are always leaving comments that you don't need a villain to be evil for a cause, they can just be evil sometimes. And I totally agree with that, and I think that Well, we do learn about Erebos' backstory a little bit, and we probably will more. Maybe he has a great reason to be evil. He strikes me as more of an evil for the sake of evil kind of guy. And I think that for that reason, I want to include him in this video where I'm going to be talking about villain backstory and villain motivation, because it's sort of like you have to talk about all the different kinds. You know, it's not my way or the highway. And I would love to have some more evil for the sake of being evil villains talked about on this channel. But anyway, I'm going to be using my free write for this. Let's see. We're going to be talking about Viren, Soren, Erebos for the villains video. Extreme spoilers for the Dragon Prince, by the way. I should have said that at the beginning, but I'm saying it now. So this is the hard part. It's like once I get started and a thesis, hypothesis, analysis, whatever you want to call it, starts forming, I usually like write it super fast. I get really invested. I'm just having fun. But starting it's always the hardest because you have to figure out what's your take on it. Let's start with Soren because he's my favorite and I've analyzed his character many times. So I think that that's a good spot to start. So for Soren, we're going to be talking about redemption arcs and self-worth. I wanted to focus in on that because I think that the self-worth is very tied to his relationship with Viren, and that the redemption arc he's a great example of a redemption arc. So if you think about a redemption arc as a character believing a lie, like for example with Soren, thinking that he has to do terrible things to make his father love him. Soren believes that lie, and then each beat of his redemption arc is when that lie is challenged, and he chooses the lie anyway, even though it was shown to him that it was a lie. Eventually, what makes it a redemption arc is that he will finally be faced with a confrontation too big for him to deny, and he will turn against the lie and believe the truth, which is that his father is a villain. I want to lay out that sort of arc. It's sort of like a 3-part arc. You know, the first step is arc part 1, villainy. Soren is loyal to his father and agrees to kill the princes even though the idea clearly upsets him. So he goes out to do that. Now, arc part 2, questioning. We'll say that he's questioning whether this is the right thing to do. I'd say that this honestly begins almost immediately. You can see it on his face, but please ignore the half shadow. But he's still loyal to his father. He still wants that approval more than anything else. And so he's still going through with it. I'd say the first bit of real questioning happens when he tries to kill Ezran for the first time. And he's talks himself into it by saying that it will be an accident. He decides to set it up so that an accident happens. He doesn't actually kill Ezran himself. I'm going to say there's probably like 3 of these major beats. So first, we're going to call it the first confrontation. Then the second confrontation, I would say, is when Soren is injured by the dragon. This is when things really start to change for him. Soren is injured by the dragon and says it's for the best because this way he can't do anything terrible. After he's healed, he still returns to his father alongside Claudia. His loyalty to his family is still beating out his common sense. So then the third confrontation, because you have to think about like the moment before everything changed. The third confrontation, I'd say, these are all the major confrontations. There's little moments throughout that show that things are shifting for him. And that's important. You have to keep in mind those little things. But the third confrontation, I would say, is when he tries to tell Claudia what Viren wanted him to do, and Viren makes it look like he was stupid and misunderstood instead of coming clean about his intentions. Real nice guy, Viren. Okay, we are on to the third part of the arc. and already at 116 words. Okay. Oh, 120 now. Arc Part 3. The final moment when everything changes. After deciding that he deserves to be put in jail, deserves to be paralyzed forever, and trying to warn his sister, after all of that, Soren turns and frees Ezran. So this is when his redemption begins. Now, he does stay with the villains for a good chunk of the 3rd season, despite having turned good. I'm not gonna break that down quite as much, because it's basically just him trying to show Claudia that Viren is evil, and the fact that his father is evil just being confirmed more and more in his mind. He's already started his redemption, and that's sort of the end of the redemption arc. Then it's up to you how you show that they've been redeemed, like with Zuko leaving the Fire Nation to try and teach Aang, or Soren freeing Ezran and fighting his father on the battlefield. So, Soren frees Ezran is the moment when the redemption begins. Now, what is compelling about this redemption arc? I think it's the level of unconscious manipulation, and it's the fight between family or what's right. It's also the fact that he has to leave Claudia behind. There's so many messy things about this relationship. Viren, on some level, does care about Soren, but not enough, and maybe not in a healthy way. Or at least he did care about Soren if you read the short stories and such and figure out all the backstory. I'd say that Viren was a hero at one point, but turned villainous. And so I think that that's where all of the messiness comes from that I'm liking. I think that it comes from a certain point of view, Viren is a hero. Humans were exiled, they were treated terribly. He's just trying to look out for his family and the people he cares about in the kingdom of Katalis. But he's doing it in a pretty evil way. It's sort of like the Saw Gerrera thing. It's like, how far can you go before you become the bad guy yourself? And that's my one Star Wars reference for the day. I think that what is compelling is Soren learning who deserves his loyalty, because he's always loyal, but it's just about who deserves it. It's about Soren having to leave Claudia, because that is painful to watch. It is about Soren and Viren's one-sided relationship. That's what it is. So what's compelling about their dynamic, in a negative way, is how much Soren is willing to sacrifice everything for his dad, and how little his dad cares or notices, or appreciates that. And I think that that brings us neatly to Viren, which we're going to label as corruption arc. How far is too far? Now, with Viren's corruption arc, this is harder. It's not as clear cut in my mind. What I like about using Soren's redemption arc as an example in my videos, and why I always bring him up, is because I feel like the plot beats are very well defined and easily to understand. What's harder about Viren is that his corruption arc, it's not like he starts out the good guy. It's more like he just gets steadily worse and worse and worse over the series. So let's just start at the beginning. The beginning. Flashbacks. Arc Part 1. Losing the Queen. Viren is very close with King Harrow. But when, I'm so sorry that I cannot remember the Queen's name. Sarai. Okay, I'm so sorry. But when Sarai dies so that he can live, maybe I'm wrong, but that feels like an important moment. It feels like everything is for the good of the people until that happens. I feel like there's gotta be some underlying guilt. Underlying guilt, question mark, and a need for revenge ensues. So I think that this is why backstory is important. If we had just watched The Dragon Prince and we were like, yep, Viren's just twisted and evil, then we wouldn't understand his relationship with Harrow, who's clearly not the villain of the story, though has done some villainy things because of Viren. So I think that Viren is sort of like a Saw Gerrera character. I said that I would only make one Star Wars reference. He's sort of like a character who goes too far in the name of good. There you go. So the arc, part 2. We will call this Taking the Egg. Even though Harrow doesn't want to, Viren is, I feel like he's a bit afraid. he's a bit afraid of everything that's happened, and he's guilty, and he's angry. Viren pushes him to want revenge. Harrow, with this kind of allowance to feel that emotion, agrees to a dark magic spell. Now, here is where things start to turn evilly. Was Viren in the wrong when he went into the Elvish kingdom to find something that could hopefully save Katalis and the other kingdoms from famine? No. I think that sounds pretty great. However, was he in the wrong when he decided to go and stir up trouble by killing the Dragon King, who had killed Queen Sarai, and, if I remember correctly, 2 other queens? This guy really has it out for queens. Now, I think that's where we get into the interesting gray territory of characters who are villains because they took heroicness too far. And not because, like, the act of killing someone is heroic, it isn't. But he had good intentions up until the point where it became too much. And it's all about figuring out, when did it become too much? When did he become the villain? And I think that in this moment, he hasn't fully fallen to villainy, but he's pretty close. He's teetering on the edge. And so that's why it's in the middle. Taking the egg, kill the Dragon King, and do some other shady stuff, which is when I feel like Viren falls into true villainy. Revenge is teetering on that place. It's like, when have you gone too far? And then the moment that you kidnap a child and turn 2 people into coins, you've sort of gone too far. That's when you've gone too far. He lies to Harrow and claims to have destroyed the egg. Now, the reason that I would classify that as the middle is because I think that it takes the moment when he's like good, and then the point where he's like in the middle, to the point where he's now villainous. Now, he does continue to get worse steadily. Arc Part 3, taking the throne. Now, Viren wanting to take the throne is understandable. He views it as protecting Katalis, the human kingdoms, everything that he's ever tried to protect and cares about. However, where he takes it too far is when he decides, you know what I'll do? I'll do anything to take this throne, even kill children. This is a bad recurring theme for him. It's like the Dragon King always killing queens. Like, what's up with this? These are bad trends, guys. Anyway, taking the throne pushes him from gray zone character leaning towards villainy into abject villainy. Once you order the death of 2 children for no reason other than you're greedy and power hungry, you're sort of the bad guy. Hate to break it to you, Viren, but you crossed a line. So, taking the throne, always in the name of the greater good, attempts to take the throne. When he cannot, he orders the princes killed, secretly, obviously, so he can have the power for himself. He still thinks he's doing the right thing for humanity, but he's lost sight of how far is too far. Back to the title. Now, why is this compelling? Because we get to see a character whose intentions are good. His motivation, the more he wants to protect humanity, the more he's willing to sacrifice humanity. It gets to the point where to save humanity and protect it, he's willing to take orders from, well, he doesn't think they're orders, but basically to take orders from an elf, turn his own son into a fire monster, and a bunch of other stuff. He's always been a bit of a shady guy, but he crosses a pretty serious line. Now, that brings us to Erebos, who feeds the flames. See, this is what I loved about the Dragon Prince, and I think that the method in which I'm filling it out shows more of that. With the Dragon Prince, every villain has a complicated relationship that connects them to another villain. And I love relationships. It's my favorite thing. I think that when we have a villain, it's like, okay, you have a villain and then they have some henchmen, and that's interesting. But when you have a villain, and then you have another villain, and then you have another villain, and they're all sort of connected in this messy spider web of mistakes and lies and relationships that are like toxic relationships, it becomes so much more interesting because it's almost like, you know how there's the hero group and they all grow together because of their relationships? With the villain group, it's like they all get worse together because of their relationships. And I think that that's really compelling and interesting. Evil for evil's sake and fueling the fire. So with Erebos, there's not a character arc to break down. There's more just, why is evil for evil's sake compelling? You know? So we want to talk about that. Why is evil for evil's sake compelling? Now, I can't argue that it isn't. It's just not what I usually write. So it's a little bit more like something that I really need to analyze, you know? Why is evil for evil's sake compelling? And I think that, again, I want to sort of talk about Erebos' influence, because he has a lot of that. Erebos' relationship with Viren is compelling because Viren thinks that he's in charge, but it has always been the other way around. I think that what's so compelling about Erebos is how easily he can play Puppet Master. Now, there's not too much to break down with Erebos because he doesn't really have a character arc in the first couple seasons at least, but I think that it's important to note his effect on the other characters. Erebos is the one who tells Viren to lie about what he sent Soren to do. Erebos is the one who initiates things with Viren. Erebos is the one who comes up with the plan to take Xadia. So what's compelling about this? I think that what's compelling is having someone scary. You want your villain to be scary. And sometimes an evil for evil's sake villain is exactly what that is. We don't really know anything about Erebos. So the unknown is scary. Erebos uses that to his advantage to make him a properly intimidating villain. He's always one step ahead. Usually, how I wrap up my videos is saying, what can you learn from this? Now that we've sort of written down everything that happens that's important to the characters and what we think is interesting about them, I try and break it down into simple things that I can apply to my story. So look over what you've written, look over what you've thought about, and go, what can I learn? From Soren, the things that I most noticed was that I liked the fact that his character arc felt like we could see the character struggle happening. Internal conflict playing out on screen makes a character arc feel more dynamic. He doesn't walk around saying, oh, you know, I just want my dad's approval and I'd do anything for that, but I think that maybe he doesn't deserve my loyalty. We get to see it. Now, another thing that I find compelling about that I think we can learn from is his relationship with Viren and Claudia. We can ask ourselves things. So make sure that your villains have the same kinds of connections to one another that you would give a group of heroes. Just maybe put a dark twist on them. If this were the hero group and it was Claudia and Soren and Viren as the heroes, then Viren would be a good influence, a father figure who was helping them to realize their potential. But because Viren is the villain, we maybe get to see a dark twist on that. We see him either take advantage of their potential or we see him disregard it entirely. We see him not helping these characters to grow, but shaping them in his own image. Now, what can we learn from Viren? I think that what we can learn from Viren is that why is important. Motivation is important. Make it so that in another light, your villain might have been the hero, or that they were the hero but took it too far. Maybe they have regrets. Maybe they have insecurities that got the better of them. Maybe they're just being taken advantage of. A villain isn't necessarily somebody who already completed their character arc. Instead, they're somebody who has the potential to have a good character arc, but has a bad one instead. A villain is not somebody with no arc. They're not a static character. They're just moving in the opposite direction as our hero. Now, what can we learn from Erebos? What makes evil for the sake of evil so scary is that you don't know what they're gonna do. You don't know what they want or why they want it. Why does the Joker want to be a bad guy? I mean, sure, he has a backstory now, but a lot of times he was just portrayed as somebody who wanted the world to burn because it could. And that's sort of what made him so scary. You never really knew what he was going to do or why he was going to do it. Whereas with Viren, if everything comes back to I want to protect humanity, then you can sort of suss out what you think he'll probably do. Even if he's not successful at saving humanity because he's making it worse by being a bad guy, you can still be like, that's his motivation, this is his backstory, he'll probably do this. But with a character like Erebos, we don't know what he wants. We don't know why he wants it. And that's what makes him so scary. It's the same reason that we're scared of the dark. It's not because the dark is inherently scary. It's because we can't see anything. We don't know what's out there. We don't know what's coming. Humans are very scared of the unknown. It's why the horror movie is scarier before you know what the monster is. Now, another thing that we can do is to think about what else I liked about Erebos in this case. For me, I really appreciated how manipulative he was. He was really good at being manipulative. Erebos is manipulating the manipulator, which makes him even scarier. He's not just the big bad. He's the big bad looming over the big bad who has minions. It's like there's Claudia and Soren, and then there's Viren, and then there's Erebos, which means that if Viren was hard for us to take on, what is Erebos if he's manipulating Viren this easily? It makes all these layers and all these relationships, and it makes this whole spider web of who knows what's going to happen. I hope that this wasn't just me rambling about the Dragon Prince, that hopefully you were able to get some advice on how to analyze stories. I think that, like I said in the beginning, the most important thing is to figure out what specific thing from the show you want to analyze, and then figure out why you want to analyze it. If you watch a show and you loved the dialogue, so you decide to analyze the dialogue, the first step to analyzing it is figuring out why you loved the dialogue in that show more than you loved it in another show. So if I'm watching The Dragon Prince and I'm like, I love these villains, I want to analyze them, then I have to figure out why did I love those villains? And that's when I can start to learn things. So let's say that next time I'm writing a fantasy series, I'm like, you know, I want this overarching evil controlling the main bad guy. I can learn from Viren and Erebos that, oh, now there's a vacuum going. I'm sorry, that's probably really loud. So I'll make this quick. But I can learn from that and what I broke down in this video. So I hope that this helped. If it did, please let me know in the comments. I can make more videos like this, and if it was confusing, let me know that too, and maybe I can try another time to explain my process better. But whatever the case, I will see you on the next page in these Dragon Prince videos coming next weeks, the next 2 weeks. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss them, and I will see you there. Till then.